We're back. I'm Dave Donaldson. Welcome back to Grip Tips. Today we're going to be talking about the Aputure 600D Pro. I'm pretty excited about this one because they're comparing it to the 800 watt Joker and a lot of other 1.2 kilowatt HMIs that are out there in the industry. So let's get into it. First up, we have the case, which has handles for lifting and also has wheels with a hidden handle that pops out for rolling the light around like luggage. Now inside of the case, we have the famous lightning clamp, which has come with their other units, along with the power cables, both the Nutric and header cable. There's also a new reflector with a tighter pattern than previous lights that they have made, and the Ballast, which is a beast and can take both AC power and batteries. And then we have the head of the light itself. Now we can head up our light using either a baby pin or a junior receiver, as just like the Nova in 300D Mark II, it can go on any stand. They also have a place on the yoke to keep the knob safe from being lost. And I was actually surprised how light the head felt. But then again, I've been kind of working out lately, so you know, check this out, I can do this. Good for you, Dave. The lightning clamp can still be attached to the riser, and our ballast will simply snap into place. We now can hook up our very different looking but rugged XLR header cable by lining up the tiny red dots and simply pressing into place on both the head of the lamp and the top of the ballast. Now the bottom of the ballast can be hooked up with AC power through the Nutric PowerCon cable. The bottom is also where you can plug in DMX cables both in and out, along with a fourth port now for running 48 volts DC. There's also 2 ports on the side of the ballast for Ethernet cables and USB. Hit the power button in the center of the ballast and huzzaz, light! Fifth element. No? My bad. Now first up, let's talk about the display. Super impressed. I don't know who designed it, but it's gorgeous. And also something to note, the screen will darken and brighten automatically depending on how much ambient light is in the room. As you can see here, when I put my finger over the sensor, it dims, and when I lift my finger, it gets brighter, helping you visually when messing with the settings. Here we can see our intensity, what type of dimming curve we are using, what kind of power we are using. You have a knob to help you adjust settings like the intensity, whether you move in 0.1% increments, full percent, or if you spin quickly, it will jump in percentages. And lastly, if you press and click the wheel, it will dial in 20% increments. Starting with our new and improved buttons from left to right, we have the menu button, which will help us cycle through some of the options, such as dimming curves. In here, you're going to find linear, S-curve, exponential, and logarithmic. Click wheel is how you make selections in these menus, and the back button on the right will help you back out of those sub-menus. Now next up is fan mode. You can turn the fans on or off. In on mode, the fans will speed up or slow down depending on how hot the light gets. Off is as it sounds, it's just off, but I will say that I tried it myself to see exactly how long this light would last before it went to kind of a overheating power shutdown mode. Starting it from a cold start, I mean with the unit completely off, when I turned it on, it gave me about 1.5 minutes. But then again, when I did it with the light already having been running for about 5 to 10 minutes and then turning the fan off, I got about 4 seconds. I'm sure that's something that can vary depending on your conditions. I mean, it's cold here in Detroit right now, so if I brought this outside and shut off the fans, probably get a little bit more time out of it. Studio mode is just like the other Aputure products. When it's on, the light will strike on immediately when it's plugged into power. And yes, this also goes for DC power as well. If you hook up batteries and studio mode is on, it's going to turn on. Now backing out of the menu and into the control system, we have 4 ways to control this light, either by Bluetooth and the Citus Link app. Also, the 2.4 gigahertz control is back and it comes inside of the case. Lumen radio and Ethernet, which to be honest, I pretty much know close to nothing about, so we're skipping it. Language, you can select either potato or tudo. Update, this is important for later on because they do have some very important updates coming out yet. We're not gonna really go over them, but just keep in mind that this does have an update menu. Now backing out, the next button that we have is lighting, which is just a hotkey to bring you back to the main interface regardless what submenu that you're in. Then the effects button, where you have 8 preset effects such as lightning, TV, pulsing, strobe, explosion, paparazzi, fireworks, and faulty bulb. Now something to note here about the effects panel, specifically when you're in lightning, you have the option to either have the effect loop over and over again, or you can set it off manually with the trigger button. The way to set this is that you can press and hold the trigger button, and it'll either go in between the looping mode, which as you can see has a little looping icon, or if that's completely gone, just hit the trigger button and the effect will display. I'm not gonna lie, this was a bit buggy for me as I was trying really hard to switch between the 2 modes, but eventually I got it. For all I know, maybe it's just a bad button that came with the unit. Unit. Now that's pretty much the 600D in a nutshell, but let's talk about some other things. Aputure says that this is a weatherproof light, and it is true. However, it's only weatherproof to a degree. What they've done is use connectors that help protect the cable from shorting, along with a bunch of other internal covering. You may have noticed that all of the ports are covered in rubber. Rubber. just things internally and externally to prevent it from getting damaged. Now that's a very smart idea. Now granted, it can't handle like heavy rain, but at the same time, what they've done is they've made it so that the 600D can last for a little while in just a little bit of rain. So when you start to feel a few drops, you can start, for example, you could start working on all the other lights that are on set that don't have that type of protection, such as like just a normal 650 watt tweeny tungsten light. You know, there's no real protection other than the cable itself. You could go and throw Cello Screen on that and then come back to the 600D. So it's kind of a way of, it's kind of like the 600D saying, sacrifice me, go help those other lights. Now, all that being said, I think a lot of other electrics out there would agree with me that regardless what type of light that you have outside, if you feel any type of rain outside, all lights get a rain hat, aka Cello Screen. If you don't know what that is, I do have a link to that in the description below. I made an episode on it. Moving on, yes, the Ballast can take ionic batteries such as V-mounts and gold mounts, but it can also charge those batteries while in use or shut off completely. However, if you are charging while using the light, it depends what lighting curve mode that you're set on and what percentage of the light that you're using. For example, if I'm in either linear or exponential, I can only charge the battery if my intensity of the light is less than 70%. And that goes with a couple of the other curves. If I'm set to S curve, it will only charge if I'm under 55%. And then lastly, if I'm set to logarithmic, it won't charge unless I'm under 35%. Also, something to note is that if you're using the batteries, you're set at half power. So even though the intensity will go all the way up to 100%, you're still at only half the ability that this light is capable of pushing. So essentially you have the intensity of a 300D Mark II. Speaking of intensity, I measured this light at 1 meter, or 3 feet rather, and it gave me a lux reading of 122,690 lux on my lumen power. I measured it again at 3 meters and it gave me 8,993 lux. Then I went and measured the color and it gave me 5,470, so basically 5,500. It's also worth noting that some of the battery manufacturers that are out there won't work on this light. It's just, it has nothing to do with what Aputure has built here. It has everything to do with that battery manufacturer. They have a lot of proprietary type of connectors, the way that I just said it, connections that just simply won't work with the light. So make sure that you're using a battery that will actually work with the light. Also, one more thing to note is that let's say you get a battery, you put it on there and absolutely nothing happens for that battery. Keep in mind that batteries have something called a protective state, and you need to make sure that you can wake the battery up out of its protective state so that it can be used with this unit, as the 600D can't wake up batteries, so you have to keep that in mind. I kind of found this out the hard way when I was buying my batteries. I had bought 2 brand new batteries like you see here, but I had to exchange one of them out because the battery was not woken up out of its protective state. It's a lot like the Q5LS episode that I did. If you remember, the Q5LS had a kill switch on it so that you could travel with it and not worry about the buttons being hit to accidentally turn on the light or anything. But once we plugged it back into the USB plug, the light was operable again. So just something to note. Now let's talk about some accessories. Yes, it comes with a completely different reflector than the other reflectors that Aputure has sold with their products, and you can see the difference right here. You can also use the Aputure spotlight attachment if you want, or you can use the light dome too. However, you cannot use the 2x Fresnel or barn doors accessories with it. This light just gets too hot for those. However, they are coming out with a bigger Fresnel and bigger barn doors, so wait for that. Don't use the 2x Fresnel because, again, it just gets too hot for it. And lastly, they came out with a new, bigger lantern for this light. As you can see here, it's the exact same design as the first lantern, just bigger. But if you have no idea what any of those accessories do, don't worry, I made an episode on that, and I'll leave a link in the description below. You may have also noticed that the yoke is curved, and that's simply to help give space to the accessories that you're using with the light. As you can see here, the reflector attachment can point pretty much straight down and then some. So what is my opinion about this light? I have no problem with it. I love this light. There is one problem. We're gonna forget the fact that that is coiled in such a way that even a snake would be uncomfortable. But the biggest thing about that cord is that it's only 3 meters long. That's only 9.8 feet. Being from a certain type of background, I know that this light is going to work primarily on a Mombo combo stand. If you haven't seen that episode, link in the description below. That light is going to live on a Mombo combo stand probably 80% of its life. A Mombo combo stand goes up to like 23 feet. Being that I can only raise this light 10 feet, it's not necessarily bad, it's just I wish that it was a lot longer. So I kind of wish that it would have came stock with a much longer cable. However, I did speak to Aputure, and this is actually going to be an accessory that they're going to sell on the side as well. I think they told me like the rumor is like 6 meters right now, but they're trying to push for longer. Sadly, that is all that I have for you guys today. If you like today's episode, please let me know in the comment section below. You can also follow me on Twitter, and we'll see you on the next one.